My name is Rebecca Martinez, and I'm 28 years old. What I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty and financial boundaries. 6 months ago, my parents sued me for refusing to sell my apartment to fund my sister's expensive divorce proceedings. They claimed I owed them financial support because they had helped me with college tuition 8 years earlier. But the lesson I taught them would cost them far more than my apartment was worth, and show them that some children fight back when parents try to steal their financial independence. This story involves family financial manipulation, legal intimidation, and a strategic counterattack that exposed years of favoritism and left my parents facing consequences they never anticipated. I had always known my younger sister Carmen was the favorite child, but I never imagined my parents would actually take me to court to force me to fund her lifestyle. Carmen had always been the golden daughter, 2 years younger, more outgoing according to family standards, and consistently enabled in every poor decision she made. She was the daughter who got her credit card debts paid off by our parents, the luxury wedding funded entirely by family money, and constant financial bailouts whenever her impulsive spending created problems. Growing up, I learned to be self-reliant while Carmen learned to be dependent. When Carmen wanted expensive clothes, our parents bought them immediately. When I wanted the same things, I was told to get a job and save up. When Carmen struggled in college, our parents hired tutors and paid for additional semesters. When I needed help, I was encouraged to figure it out myself. The pattern continued into adulthood. Carmen married her college boyfriend in an elaborate ceremony that cost our parents over $40,000. My wedding 2 years later was a modest celebration that David and I paid for ourselves because our parents claimed they were financially tapped out from Carmen's wedding expenses. Carmen's marriage had been troubled from the beginning. Her husband Jake was a decent man, but Carmen had expensive tastes and no understanding of budgeting or financial responsibility. She wanted the lifestyle of a wealthy woman on a middle-class income, and when Jake couldn't provide luxury vacations, designer handbags, and constant restaurant dining, she began resenting their marriage. 3 years after her wedding, Carmen announced she was filing for divorce. Not because of any serious marital problems, but because she had decided she deserved better and wanted to find someone more successful who could support the lifestyle she wanted. The divorce was going to be expensive because Carmen was demanding alimony, half of Jake's retirement savings, and the house they had purchased together, despite the fact that she had contributed very little to their joint finances during their marriage. "I need a good lawyer," Carmen told our parents during a family dinner. "Jake is being unreasonable about the settlement. His attorney is trying to claim I don't deserve alimony because I chose to leave." "How much are we talking about?" my father asked. "About $30,000 for legal fees, plus living expenses while the divorce is pending. I can't work full-time because the stress is affecting my health, and I need to focus on getting what I deserve from this marriage." I watched as my parents immediately began discussing how they could come up with $30,000 to fund Carmen's divorce proceedings. This was the same couple who had told me they couldn't help with my student loan payments because they needed to save for retirement. "We could take out a home equity loan," my mother suggested. "Or borrow against the 401k, my father added. "Actually," Carmen said, looking directly at me, "Rebecca owns that apartment downtown. It's worth at least $180,000 now. She could sell it and give me what I need for the divorce." I stared at her in disbelief. Carmen was casually suggesting I sell my home to fund her voluntary divorce. "I'm not selling my apartment," I said firmly. "Why not?" Carmen asked, as if my refusal was completely unreasonable. "You don't really need all that space. You could rent something smaller and help your sister when she needs you. Carmen, I'm not selling my home so you can divorce a perfectly good husband because you want a richer one. The silence at the dinner table was uncomfortable. My parents looked at me like I was being selfish and unsupportive. Rebecca, my father said carefully, family helps family. Carmen is going through a difficult time. Carmen is choosing to go through a difficult time, I replied. Her marriage problems are self-created, and her divorce is voluntary. I'm not funding her bad decisions. That's really harsh, my mother said. We helped you through college. Don't you think you owe us some support now that we need it? That comment revealed everything I needed to know about how my parents viewed our relationship. They saw their help with my college tuition not as parental investment in their daughter's education, but as a debt I owed them that could be called in whenever it was convenient for Carmen. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. My parents called regularly to discuss Carmen's desperate situation and my obligation to help family members in need. She's your only sister, my mother would say. What if you needed help someday? Wouldn't you want Carmen to be there for you? The irony was that I had needed help many times over the years with student loans, job searches, medical bills, and other normal adult challenges. But Carmen had never been there for me, and my parents had consistently told me to handle my problems independently. Now they expected me to sacrifice my financial security for Carmen's elective lifestyle change. The breaking point came when my father called with an ultimatum. Rebecca, we've given you time to think about this, and you're being unreasonable. Carmen's divorce proceedings are starting, and she needs that money now. Dad, I'm not selling my apartment. That's final. Then you're forcing us to take legal action. I almost laughed. Legal action? For what? You owe us approximately $25,000 for college tuition we paid on your behalf. Plus interest over 8 years, that comes to about $40,000. We're prepared to sue you for repayment unless you agree to help Carmen voluntarily. They were threatening to sue me for money they had given me for education 8 years earlier, money that had never been presented as a loan at the time. You never said college tuition was a loan, I said. We shouldn't have had to specify that. Family members are expected to support each other. We supported your education, now you support Carmen's divorce. Carmen's divorce isn't an investment in her future. It's funding her poor decisions. We'll be filing papers next week unless you change your mind, my father said, and hung up. That evening, David and I sat in our apartment, the home they wanted me to sell, and discussed our options. They can't actually force you to sell the apartment, David said. Even if they could prove you owed them money, which is doubtful, they couldn't force you to liquidate specific assets. I know. But they're willing to drag me through court to pressure me into giving Carmen money she doesn't deserve. What do you want to do? I looked around our apartment, the first home I had ever owned, purchased with money I had saved 3 years of careful budgeting and financial discipline. The place where David and I were building our life together, where we hoped to start a family someday. I want to teach them that some people fight back when they're threatened, I said. What my parents didn't realize was that threatening to sue me was the biggest mistake they could have made. Because while they were planning to take me to court over imaginary debts, I was about to expose years of financial favoritism and manipulation that would cost them far more than my apartment was worth. They thought they could intimidate me into funding Carmen's lifestyle. Instead, they were about to learn that their responsible daughter had been documenting their preferential treatment for years. And the countersuit I was preparing would show them exactly how much their golden child had actually cost them, while proving that I didn't owe them anything except the truth about their systematic family favoritism. My parents wanted a legal battle over family financial obligations. They were about to get exactly what they asked for, but not the outcome they expected. True to their threat, my parents filed a lawsuit against me the following week. I received legal papers claiming I owed them $42,000 for educational expenses advanced on my behalf plus interest and legal fees. The lawsuit was clearly designed to pressure me into settling by selling my apartment and giving Carmen the money she needed for her divorce. They expected me to be intimidated by the legal process and cave to their demands rather than fight a public court battle. They had seriously underestimated their daughter. I hired Elena Rodriguez, one of the best family law attorneys in the city, and began building what would become the most thorough financial documentation of family favoritism ever presented in a family court. The good news, Elena told me during our first meeting, is that their case is weak. College tuition given by parents is typically considered a gift unless there's clear documentation that it was intended as a loan. And the bad news? Proving that would normally be enough to win, but I think you want more than just to win this case. You want to expose the pattern of behavior that led to it. She was right. I didn't just want to defend myself against their lawsuit. I wanted to document years of financial favoritism that had culminated in them trying to force me to fund Carmen's lifestyle. Over the next month, I began compiling evidence that painted a complete picture of how my parents had treated their two daughters differently for our entire lives. I started with college expenses, since that was the basis of their lawsuit. Through careful review of bank statements, tuition receipts, and family financial records, I discovered that my parents had actually spent more money on Carmen's college experience than mine. My college tuition at the state university had been $16,000 per year for 4 years, totaling $64,000. But I had also worked part-time jobs and received partial scholarships that reduced the amount my parents actually paid to $48,000. Carmen's college experience was very different. She had chosen a private university that cost $35,000 per year. When she struggled academically, my parents paid for tutors, additional semesters, and ultimately 5.5 years of tuition. They also paid for her to live in the most expensive dorms, covered her sorority fees, and gave her a generous monthly allowance for expenses. The total amount my parents spent on Carmen's college education was $127,000, nearly 3 times what they had spent on mine. But that was just the beginning of the financial disparity. I created spreadsheets documenting every major financial contribution my parents had made to each daughter over the past 10 years. Carmen's wedding, $42,000. My wedding, $0. Carmen's car payments and insurance over 5 years, $28,000. My car payments and insurance, $0. Carmen's credit card debt bailouts, 3 separate occasions, $18,000. My credit card debt bailouts, $0. Carmen's apartment security deposit and first year's rent when she couldn't afford it, $15,000. My apartment assistance, $0. Carmen's medical bills when she didn't have insurance, $8,000. My medical bills, $0. Carmen's emergency loans for vacations, shopping, and lifestyle expenses, $12,000. My emergency loans, $0. The total amount my parents had given Carmen over the past 10 years was $250,000. The total amount they had given me was $48,000 for college tuition. But the most damaging evidence came from family communications I had saved over the years. I had kept emails where my parents explicitly told me to be more independent and stop asking for help while simultaneously discussing Carmen's latest financial crisis and how they were going to solve it for her. I had text messages where my mother complained about Carmen's spending habits but then asked me to be understanding when Carmen needed another bailout. I had voicemails where my father praised my financial responsibility but then suggested I should use that responsibility to help Carmen when she made poor choices. Most importantly, I had recorded phone conversations from the months leading up to their lawsuit, where they explicitly stated that they expected me to sell my apartment to fund Carmen's divorce because family helps family. Elena was amazed by the thoroughness of my documentation. In 20 years of family law, I've never seen someone so systematically document financial favoritism, she told me. This isn't just a defense against their lawsuit, this is evidence of a pattern of discrimination that could support a countersuit. What kind of countersuit? Intentional infliction of emotional distress, financial discrimination, and potentially restitution for the difference in treatment. If they want to claim that family financial support creates legal obligations, then they owe you about $200,000 in equal treatment. While I was building my legal case, Carmen's divorce proceedings were falling apart without the $30,000 she had expected to get from my apartment sale. She had hired an expensive lawyer expecting to pay him with money from my forced house sale, but when that money didn't materialize, her attorney withdrew from her case due to non-payment. Carmen was forced to represent herself in divorce court, where her demands for alimony and half of Jake's assets were quickly dismissed by a judge who noted that she had initiated the divorce without cause and had contributed very little to the marriage financially. Instead of the lucrative settlement she had expected, Carmen ended up with minimal assets and no alimony. She also had to pay her own legal fees and court costs, which left her completely broke. "This is all your fault," she screamed at me during a family confrontation at our parents' house. "If you had just helped me like you were supposed to, I would have gotten what I deserved from that marriage." "What you deserved was exactly what you got," I replied calmly. "Nothing." Carmen had moved back in with our parents after her divorce failed to provide the financial windfall she had expected. At 26 years old, she was unemployed, living in her childhood bedroom, and completely dependent on our parents for survival. Meanwhile, my parents' lawsuit against me was drawing negative attention from extended family members who were learning about the financial favoritism for the first time. My aunt called me after hearing about the legal proceedings. "Rebecca, I had no idea your parents had been treating you girls so differently. Carmen always seemed to have everything she wanted, but I thought you were just more independent by choice." My grandmother was horrified when she learned that my parents were suing me to force me to sell my home. "That apartment represents everything you've worked for. The fact that they want you to give it up for Carmen's mistakes is unconscionable." Even family friends began questioning my parents' judgment when word spread about the lawsuit. "Frank and Maria are really suing Rebecca to make her pay for Carmen's divorce?" I overheard one family friend asking another at a community event. "That seems incredibly unfair to the daughter who actually has her life together." The social pressure was mounting on my parents to drop their ridiculous lawsuit, but they were too committed to their golden child to back down. That's when I decided it was time to file my countersuit. Elena prepared a comprehensive legal response that not only defended against their $42,000 claim but also demanded $200,000 in damages for financial discrimination, emotional distress, and the difference in treatment between Carmen and me. The countersuit included every piece of documentation I had compiled, presented in a format that made the systematic favoritism impossible to deny or dismiss. But the most devastating aspect of my legal response was the discovery process, which would require my parents to produce all their financial records for the past 10 years. They would have to provide bank statements, tax returns, receipts, and documentation for every dollar they had given Carmen, while also explaining why they had never provided similar support to me. The beauty of this approach, Elena explained, is that everything will become public record. Their financial favoritism won't be a family secret anymore. It will be documented in court proceedings that anyone can access. When my parents received my countersuit, they finally began to understand the consequences of their decision to take me to court. They weren't just facing a simple lawsuit over college tuition anymore. They were facing a comprehensive legal examination of 28 years of parenting decisions, financial choices, and systematic discrimination. And the daughter they had sued to fund Carmen's divorce was about to prove in court that she didn't owe them anything, but they owed her far more than they had ever been willing to give. The phone call I received from my father 3 days after he was served with my countersuit would reveal just how panicked they were becoming about the legal battle they had started. But by then, it was too late to back down. They had chosen to make our family problems a matter of public legal record, and I was going to make sure that record told the complete truth about their favoritism. 3 days after my parents received my countersuit, my father called me at 6 a.m., his voice shaking with panic and desperation. "Rebecca, we need to talk immediately. This has gotten completely out of hand." "Has it?" I replied calmly. "You sued me first. I'm just responding to your legal action. We never intended for this to become so complicated. Can we meet to discuss dropping both lawsuits?" "Too late for that, Dad. You made this a public legal matter. Now we're going to let the court system determine who owes whom." The discovery process had begun, and my parents were required to produce 10 years of financial records that would expose their systematic favoritism in excruciating detail. Elena had subpoenaed bank statements, tax returns, credit card records, and any documentation related to financial gifts or loans to either daughter. My parents had to provide receipts for every dollar they had given Carmen while explaining why they had never provided similar support to me. The evidence was even more damaging than I had initially documented. Bank records revealed that my parents had been giving Carmen monthly allowances of $800 to $1,200 for years, payments they had disguised as temporary help but which had continued for over 5 years. Credit card statements showed luxury purchases made for Carmen, designer handbags, expensive vacations, spa treatments, and restaurant bills that totaled tens of thousands of dollars. Most damaging were email exchanges between my parents discussing how to continue supporting Carmen without me finding out about the extent of their financial assistance. "We need to be more discreet about helping Carmen," my mother had written to my father. "Rebecca is already resentful about the wedding costs. If she knew about the monthly payments, she would be even more upset. Maybe we should offer Rebecca some help too," my father had replied. "For appearances. No, Rebecca doesn't need help. She's financially responsible. Carmen needs us more." The emails proved that my parents had consciously decided to continue enabling Carmen while deliberately excluding me from similar support, not because I didn't need help, but because they knew I would be responsible with money while Carmen would always need more. But the most explosive discovery came from Carmen's own financial records, which she was required to produce as part of the divorce proceedings that had started this entire legal battle. Carmen had been lying to our parents about why she needed money. The $18,000 in emergency credit card debt bailouts hadn't been for medical expenses or car repairs as she had claimed. Bank records showed the money had been spent on luxury shopping, expensive dinners, and weekend trips with friends. The $12,000 in temporary loans hadn't been for genuine emergencies. They had funded Carmen's lifestyle expenses, designer clothes, professional makeup and hair appointments, and expensive gym memberships. Even more shocking, Carmen had been receiving money from our parents while simultaneously maintaining a secret savings account that she hadn't disclosed during her divorce proceedings. Your sister has been essentially defrauding both your parents and her ex-husband, Elena told me as we reviewed the financial records. She's been claiming poverty to get money from your family while hiding assets from the divorce court. The evidence painted a picture of systematic deception that went far beyond simple favoritism. 3 weeks into the discovery process, my parents' attorney contacted Elena to discuss settlement options. My clients are willing to drop their lawsuit and pay your client's legal fees in exchange for her dropping the countersuit, their lawyer proposed. Not interested, Elena replied. My client wants this case to go to trial. She wants a judge to examine 28 years of financial discrimination and rule on whether parents have a legal right to treat their children unequally. My parents were desperate to avoid a trial that would make their favoritism a matter of public record, but I was determined to see the case through to completion. The breaking point came when Carmen was subpoenaed to testify in a deposition about her financial relationship with our parents. Under oath, Carmen was forced to admit that she had never intended to repay any of the money our parents had given her, that she had lied about the purposes for which she needed money, and that she had hidden assets during her divorce proceedings. Did you expect your parents to sue your sister to force her to fund your divorce? Elena asked during the deposition. I expected my family to support me when I needed help, Carmen replied evasively. Did you ever offer to support your sister when she needed help? Rebecca never asked for help. Did you ever offer? Long pause. No. Did you ever suggest that your parents were treating you and your sister unequally? I don't know what you mean. You received $250,000 in financial support over 10 years while your sister received $48,000. Did you think that was fair? I needed more help than Rebecca. Why? Because I made different choices. You mean poor choices? Carmen's attorney objected, but the damage was done. Carmen had admitted under oath that she knew she was being treated preferentially and that it was because of her poor decision-making. 2 weeks later, my parents called to request another settlement meeting. This time, they came with a very different offer. We want to drop our lawsuit against you, my father said. We also want to pay your legal fees and make a financial gesture to acknowledge that we haven't treated you and Carmen equally. What kind of financial gesture? Elena asked. We're prepared to offer Rebecca $50,000 as compensation for the disparity in support we've provided over the years. I almost laughed. They were offering me $50,000 when the evidence showed they owed me over $200,000 in equal treatment. Not interested, I said. I want this case to go to trial. Rebecca, please, my mother said, tears in her eyes. This is tearing our family apart. You tore our family apart when you sued me to force me to sell my home for Carmen's mistakes, I replied. You made this a legal matter. Now we're going to let a judge decide. But my parents had one more card to play, and it was the most desperate move of all. They offered to disown Carmen. "What if we cut off all financial support to Carmen permanently?" my father asked. "What if we wrote her out of our will and promised never to give her another dollar? Would that be enough for you to drop this case?" The offer revealed just how panicked they were about the trial, but it also showed that they still didn't understand the real issue. "This isn't about Carmen's future," I explained. "This is about 28 years of unequal treatment that culminated in you trying to steal my home. You can't undo that damage by promising to treat her badly going forward." "Then what do you want?" my mother asked desperately. "I want a judge to examine the evidence and rule that what you did was wrong. I want it in the public record that parents don't have the right to discriminate between their children and then sue the responsible child to fund the irresponsible one." The trial was scheduled for 6 weeks later, but it never happened. 1 week before the court date, my parents' attorney called Elena to announce that they were dismissing their lawsuit and would not contest my countersuit. My parents agreed to pay me $175,000 in damages, all legal fees for both sides, and issue a written apology acknowledging their financial discrimination and the harm it had caused. The settlement also included a formal agreement that they would never again request, demand, or sue for any financial support from me, and that any future gifts or inheritance would be distributed equally between Carmen and me. But the most satisfying aspect of the settlement was that Carmen was required to repay our parents the $25,000 in emergency loans that had actually been used for luxury expenses, money she would have to earn through actual employment for the first time in her adult life. The day the settlement was finalized, I received a call from Carmen. "Are you happy now?" she asked bitterly. "You've destroyed our family over money." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied. "I simply refuse to let you steal my home to fund your bad decisions." Mom and Dad are devastated. They can't believe their own daughter sued them. "They sued me first, Carmen. They threatened to take me to court unless I sold my apartment to give you money you didn't earn and didn't deserve. I needed that money. You needed to get a job and support yourself like an adult." 6 months after the settlement, Carmen had indeed gotten her first real job in over 3 years. She was working as a receptionist at a dental office, living in a modest apartment she actually paid for herself, and learning to budget like a normal person. My parents and I have a cordial but distant relationship now. They invite me to family gatherings and treat me respectfully, but there's an underlying tension that probably won't ever disappear completely. The most important change is that they finally treat me as an equal adult rather than someone whose financial independence could be sacrificed for Carmen's comfort. I used the settlement money to pay off my mortgage completely, turning my apartment into a true asset that no one could ever threaten to take away from me again. David and I also started a college fund for our future children, with clear documentation that it will be a gift, not a loan that could be weaponized later. "Do you think they learned their lesson?" David asked me recently. I looked around our mortgage-free apartment, thought about Carmen working her first real job at 26, and considered the legal precedent we had established for other adult children facing family financial manipulation. "They learned that some children fight back when parents try to steal from them," I said. "They learned that favoritism has consequences. And they learned that threatening to sue someone is a very dangerous game when that person has been documenting your unfair treatment for years." My parents had sued me expecting to intimidate me into funding Carmen's lifestyle. Instead, they provided me with the legal framework to expose 28 years of systematic favoritism and get $175,000 in compensation for their discrimination. Carmen had expected me to sacrifice my home for her voluntary divorce. Instead, she ended up repaying money to our parents and getting her first real job as an adult. My name is Rebecca Martinez. I'm 29 years old, and I'm the daughter who learned that sometimes the best response to family manipulation is a well-documented legal case. Sometimes parents need to learn that adult children have rights, boundaries, and the ability to fight back when those rights are violated. And sometimes the most expensive lesson parents can learn is that fair treatment isn't optional just because one child is more responsible than the other. They'll regret suing me for the rest of their lives, but I'll never regret standing up for myself when my own parents tried to steal my financial independence for their golden child's benefit.